Amanda Maddock is a puppeteer, builder, wrangler, and teacher who has experience working with puppets of all sizes. From the regular size puppets of the Book of Pooh, Bear in the Big Blue House, Between the Lions, Sesame Street, and the Muppets, to the enormous puppets of the Walking with Dinosaurs and How to Train Your Dragon live tours. Amanda's career has taken her across the country and around the world, including to Iceland to work on LazyTown and Russia to puppeteer in the opening ceremonies of the 2014 Winter Olympics. Versed in many styles of puppetry, from tabletop to hand and rod to the animatronics of the two Five Nights at Freddy's films, she has done it all. It's my pleasure to chat with Amanda Maddock about all these projects and more on this episode of Under the Puppet. You're listening to Saturday Morning Media. And now, back to our show. Welcome to the show that is preserving puppetry through the personal stories of professional puppeteers. My name is Grant Pachoco, and this is Under the Puppet. Well, I'm very excited to have on the show the one, the only Amanda Maddock. Amanda, welcome to Under the Puppet.
Thank you so much. I would like to disclaimer, I am not the one and only Amanda Maddock. Apparently there's one in Ohio.
Oh, okay.
I imagine all the time that when she has friends that say, like, did you know there's somebody with your name who does puppets? And, and she, probably has rolled her eyes and been like, yeah, I'm sure, I think about that sometimes.
Well, this is the Ohio podcast, so I'm going to have to ask you to leave. I'm sorry. I thought it was the other Amanda Maddock.
Fair point.
No. It's a pleasure to have you here. I'm super excited to talk to you about your puppetry career, and I would love to know, as I always ask at this stop, do you remember the first time you saw puppets, the first time puppets were on your radar?
Well, I think the age that I'm at, I'm sure it's Sesame Street, right? It had to, or Mr. Rogers. But I grew up in New England. There was definitely, in first grade, we had, I think the National Marionette Theater come through and do a performance, a pretty large scale performance. And I have no idea what the story was, but I remember the stage and it being glorious. So let's say that. Those two, public television and public education.
Yeah. Did you grow up in a creative household?
I would say not exactly that, but I would say that my parents were very encouraging. I was sent to Waldorf nursery school and kindergarten, which certainly is encouraging of the imagination. I think it's based on like Rudolf Steiner, which is definitely square crayons, a lot of watercolors, finger knitting, dancing eurythmy with these special shoes, things like that. But there's a funny story in my family where there was a point I was allowed to watch TV, and so advertising, I was like, I wanted a Barbie so badly, and my mom always is like, I knew, there was no not getting you a Barbie, and then I knew, once you had a Barbie, I was just gonna have to put you in public school. It just wasn't for you. And I think I was always trying to draw specific shapes, and the teachers would be like, "Why don't you use the side of the crayon?" And I'd be like, "Because that's not how you draw a flower, lady."
Well, you did a lot of drawing as a kid, right?
Oh, 100%. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, that was certainly a very fun diversion. And then, also I think about those activity books that your parents would buy you for a long road trip or something like that, with those invisible ink markers or something like that. But yeah, art was certainly a passionate diversion of mine as a kid.
And you also, I seem to remember, we did an interview several years ago for another podcast, but you mentioned you would make sort of dioramas with your Barbies as well.
Yes. Yes. I have a younger sister, and we often like to joke that I was very much art directing or production designing the thing, and she'd be holding the Barbies come on, I want to play, and I'd be like, it's not finished, hold on.
Well, that was very much like me. I mean, I had G.I. Joes, but I would set up huge displays of this is a snapshot of the battle that's happening.
Yeah.
So it's kind of the same thing, I think.
Absolutely.
And sort of puppetry a little bit.
I think so. I mean, we're certainly looking at shape, scale, layers. Absolutely. I think it all counts.
And you sort of started performing in high school, right? Like you were in the theater program in high
Yes, I
school?
got into acting. In high school, the drama teacher there, he really loved to do farces. He really liked to try to have it feel as professional as possible. So I remember seeing, when I was a freshman, seeing the show that year and being like, holy moly, like, can I be a part of that? And the next year I auditioned and I was very, lucky to get fortunate to be cast. And that was like, okay, I'm sold. That's that. I love it. From there, affecting the course of my life.
What was it before that? Did you have an idea of like what you wanted to do, or you just no? But then that set you on your way.
I think before that I had been taking a lot of art classes through when I was in junior high, and I continued that through high school. But I think, I was like, oh, I want to be an artist. I think when I was younger, I think a lot of kids maybe that like to draw be like, I want to be a Disney animator. I really liked that stuff a lot. And then it was in junior high, I was introduced to like watercolors and pastels and maybe perspective drawing and things that way. So continued with that. And then, it was literally like this mesh of art and performance when I got back into the Muppets, I guess, or being interested in puppetry and what that could be when I was in high school.
Yeah, when did you really start noticing puppetry and what that could be? Like you just said.
Well, I think it was, I probably mentioned this 10 years ago too. I think it was Nickelodeon, Nick at Night started rerunning The Muppet Show. And in like the early 90s, and I had a bunch of like cool funny friends and we were all watching it, and then it was just like, isn't that like making stuff and performing with it? That's fun. Like that's a layer that I like to make things. And then I think I started seeking out local puppet performers, theaters in the area. Like at First Night in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, there was a group that I went to see called Perry Alley Theater, which Andrew and Bonnie Perry Alley, who have that theater, I think started the Puppetry International magazine sometime in the mid to late 90s as well. But anyway, so I went and saw them perform and then kind of like hung around the stage afterwards. I was like, I like puppets, and I was over the age of 12, so they talked to me a little bit longer. And then somebody else told me then at that time, when I was still in high school, about the puppetry program at the University of Connecticut. And again, though, that was like the mid 90s. So the internet I couldn't find anything about the program. So I was just like, oh, okay, good to know. But never really sought that out until I was in college.
Yeah, it was really, because I grew up in the same time, and it's really this weird thing where like you'd hear about things, but there was no way, unless I don't know, because even checking out a book in the library, the books were always so old. It was like, oh, this doesn't tell me much.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but you attended Skidmore College. What made you decide to enroll there?
Skidmore had a strong art and theater program, and I think I was just looking at colleges in general in the Northeast, probably somewhat relative to New York City, not too far away, but I didn't want to go to school in New York City. I don't know, as an 18-year-old, I was like, that sounds like a distraction from my education. Like, I don't know. So, somewhat regional to that. And then going to visit that campus, it was like, I could live here, I could be here. But they also, Skidmore at the time, I think maybe they still have it, they really talked about having a liberal arts education. So you were absolutely required to have these classes that you had to take as well. So, I remember taking like a film class about the Weimar Republic in Germany and the time period between World War I and World War II. I took a physics class about light and color. So I just had this strong idea that I wanted to have an interesting education to kind of support the theater and art that I wanted to pursue.
And were you still like heavily into puppetry at this time? Was that still kind of the goal, or did you have another idea of what you might want to do after college?
No, it was still puppetry, but deciding to study theater and knowing that that was an aspect of it, and going to a college that had kind of like a modern theater program. I mentioned my interest in puppetry, and they were like, "Oh yeah, totally. It's a part of Eastern theater," and they just kind of like kept that in mind. And so there were some productions. I think when I was a sophomore or a junior, there was kind of some original work being created. And they were like, oh, it's going to be a new musical based on the Gertrude Stein World is Round, and we want to have puppets in it. Do you want to build them? And I was like, oh, okay. So they just kind of said like, great, it's yours. And I think by that point, I had actually gone away as a student for a semester to the puppetry program at the University of Connecticut and had some exposure to different styles of puppetry and classes there, but then also had gone to the O'Neill Puppetry Conference that summer as well, and had met artists working. So yeah, I've kind of had more tools in my toolbox by the time I was back at Skidmore and being asked to make something like that. And then also as a senior thesis project, as I was a directing concentration, and they were like, "Are you going to do a project? What do you want to do?" And I was like, "I'm going to make up my own show, and it's going to have all these different kinds of puppets in it." And they just said, "Okie dokie, like go ahead." And that was after I had studied in London and Europe the previous semester as well. So I had done a Shakespeare program there, but then also I was like, haha, so much puppetry to go see. So I had gone and seen whatever I could see when I was in London, but then had gone over to like Prague and Budapest and other places and tried to seek out shows and be exposed to stuff there too at the time. So I feel like that was a good match for me, because I told them what I was interested in, and they were like, "Oh, sounds like you're pretty, well directed on what you want to do." And then at the same time, I was also still doing classes in the art department there, and sort of filling in the gaps there too, and then also doing costuming as well. So I had my work study in the costume shop, and having access to those materials and like a key to the costume shop when they sort of was like, "Sure, what do you want to play with?" So yeah, it was a good opportunity. I think in retrospect, you always wish there were like a million more things. You're like, "Oh, I should have, like, why didn't I also study sculpture?" That seems like an obvious thing to have missed, but so it goes.
Yeah. Yeah, we always look back and are like, I should have done this. I should have.
Yeah, it's like there should be a saying about that.
I don't know. Maybe Amanda in Ohio knows. I don't want to gloss over University of Connecticut, because that really is kind of, even to this day, kind of the place you go to, the university you go to for puppetry stuff. Not that there's not other programs, but that's the program. So what was it like studying at University of Connecticut for that semester?
So again, showing my age card of this being the mid to late 90s. This was like the spring semester of 1997. So this was great. People that attended UConn, when the puppet department used to be in the basement of a men's dormitory, which was that. And it was great. It was magical. I remember arriving like, mid-year. I was there for the spring semester, so things were kind of well underway. People had these great tri-corner desks and shelves and projects and going on. And of course, UConn also, in addition to having an undergraduate program, they also have a variety of what people were studying. And I was just so excited to like be amongst this knowledge. And then Bart Rockaburton was teaching still then at the time. And there were just people that were there and like hanging out all of the time. I could stay there so late. Like I had no friends. I didn't know anybody at UConn. It was a huge school, but here was the puppet shop and I could just go and like spend so much of my time there. I want to mention a shout out at that time. Somebody that we lost earlier this year is Tom Keegan, who had been in the master's program at that time, and he was like the mayor of the shop. He was so nice, and he was there all the time, and he would just like chit chat, and he was so friendly, and that was like a really nice segue to being there, to feeling welcome, and I could just make that like my second home as opposed to this weird dorm room like down the block that I was staying in. And yeah, I think that was the first time that Hua Hua Zhang was there, that she was teaching Chinese rod puppetry. I had like a TV puppetry class. We took a class they were offering, it was like a survey of American puppetry, and we were studying a lot of artists that way. So it was kind of a great semester that I happened to choose to be there. And then I think they also let me do an independent study, because I kind of wanted to do some tabletop puppetry building and develop a little piece that way, since I was there for a short time. And I think, again, it was just another program. It was kind of like, yeah, whatever you want to do, how much time you want to put into it is kind of what you'll get out of it. And some people that are still in the industry there, like Nate Wilson, I met him there. He is somebody that worked in New York at Puppet Heap for a long time, and then was out in Portland. I think he's down working at Swaybox right now. But and then Carol Sims D'Agostino I met there at the time, and then also coming through the time, I think like Rob Saunders, who has worked in a lot of studios on both coasts and things that way. So yeah, it was I'm really thankful for it's funny. I think Connecticut was about 2 hours away from Skidmore, but they called it like another abroad semester that I had.
Was there any sort of, after being there for that semester, was there any sort of thought of like, oh, maybe I should just come here? Like go,
Nope.
not, no?
No, I loved it, but I think I remember saying so specifically, at Skidmore, I was a name. At UConn, I was a social security number. And even though the program was great, I just was like, no. I mean, I think also having the opportunity to go from UConn to going to the puppetry conference at the O'Neill and making all these New York connections, it just was like, no, I'm gonna keep on my path, and keep these people in keep in contact with these folks, and then it'll just reconnect once I get to New York.
Well, you mentioned the O'Neill Puppetry Conference, and you've gone several times as a participant and an emerging artist and as assistant director and a mentor. Do you feel that the National Puppetry Conference is an important place for puppeteers to attend?
I think it's a great opportunity. I think attending the O'Neill is a great opportunity to make connections, right? I mean, it is really about meeting other artists, seeing what they're doing. I think there is nothing like an intensive, right? Being there for 7 to 10 days, you can live, breathe, and sleep or not puppets. You can be in that workshop developing stuff, and I think that's so special and that's so unique to just be able to focus that. You don't have to do your laundry, you don't have to make your own food. You get to just do that, and then having, I think, the opportunity to work with the guest artists that they bring in as well. It's just so fun. So I think, right, there is nothing like it in that way. I think there are, what's great now, some other programs around the country that do have a parallel endeavor, an opportunity to study puppetry, and there are theaters that are offering their own style of workshop that way. But yeah, I loved going to the O'Neill all these different times and participating in different ways. And the fact that it is different guest artists that come there, I mean, that you can really learn. You can keep going to the same place and have an opportunity to learn from other people, new people.
You also studied at Puppets in Prague and with the Sandglass Theater. You've done a lot of like kind of workshop things and looking at your website and your sort of training. Did you find like these workshops worthwhile to participate in?
Puppets in Prague is magical. I'll say that to anybody. If you have the funding to get yourself over to Prague, they are a wonderful workshop because they also, I think, still teach a variety of different skills. I did the stop motion workshop, but they also curate the experience of being in Prague in terms of opportunities of culture to attend and theater shows to see. And then with the stop motion stuff, I mean, we were meeting the artists who were still working in the business. We'd go to their studios, and that was such a unique experience. I met two performers at Bob Baker last month who both did the marionette building workshops last summer, and they still raved about it as well. So yeah, Mirek and Leah, who lead the workshop, they have really made something very special. So I think that's a great opportunity, to just culturally be somewhere else. I think that, all kinds of puppetry inform each other and you can meet interesting artists. And so I feel like in order to stay vital, in order to stay interested, in order to, like, I don't know if it's like connecting to the young folks or what, but it is great to kind of get out of your comfort zone, try something new. And then in terms of, like, let's say, for example, Sandglass Theater in Vermont, the summer intensive that they do, it's very physical. And so I also just relish that opportunity to be like sore again in the morning and like, having these long days. I've always been sort of I guess historically, I do like a strict training regimen, and so and they have we have like warm-ups every day, and then breath training, and then group animation, and then other classes in the afternoon, and it's they call it an intensive for a reason. So yeah, I think that it's fun to not get too bored maybe with where you are and what you're doing every day. Don't get me wrong, I feel very lucky that I'm working where I'm working and what I get a chance to do. But it's nice to go away and yet have it still be related to what I care about and what my career is.
Yeah. I only went to the O'Neill proper once. But I just feel like when you go to something like that, and I'm saying like the conference or a workshop or something like this, you might see one thing that really you latch onto and changes you. And so, or like, just like, oh, I want to explore that more, that you wouldn't have seen had you not gone, had not gone there. So
I think we're super lucky that there's so much to be seen online, on social media and things that way. But there is nothing like going to a place and seeing something live, or having an interaction that is not recorded. That it is important still. I think maybe more. The more we're involved on our screens, the more important it is to actually have real exchanges and tangible, physical encounters.
yeah. After college, you started creating your own shows, right? Your own puppetry shows. And in 2000, you had a show called Thursday's Child at the Henson International Puppetry Festival. Can you tell us about that show?
Sure. So Thursday's Child was a short piece that was at the festival. That was part of the late night cabaret at PS 122. I think that was being curated by the Elementals at that time, which was James Godwin and John Pavlik. And Thursday's Child, I was so fortunate that I managed to get a friend from college, this wonderful musician composer named Josh Chambers, to kind of create these original songs. I had kind of written what the song should be about, what it should feel like. I kind of maybe wrote some key lines. I would say, did I really write the lyrics? Maybe I did, but he put it together. So it was maybe it's 10 or 12 minutes, 10 minutes long, and an entirely musical piece. And it's sort of based on the poem, Monday's child is fair-faced, Tuesday's child is full of grace. And it was basically about a sibling that the puppet had no legs, and it was pretty introverted, and its imagination, when it was left alone by the rest of the family, had a toy box, and all the toy box flipped open, and all the stuffed animals jumped out, and they sang it like a happy song, don't be sad, but it was a pretty not safe for work song, but it was all in a very cheery tone. And then I think the final image was maybe a larger toy version of itself came out of the box and kind of cradled it, and everybody went back into the box. The end. So I don't know, your imagination will save you, if that's the thing, maybe. Yeah.
And at this time, were you just kind of developing your own shows to do these sort of cabaret type things? Were you?
Yes.
Because something you're very good at is creating slam pieces, even or shorter. I won't say necessarily pigeonhole them as slam pieces, but shorter puppetry pieces. And it's something that you even do to this day, here in the Los Angeles Guild of Puppetry. So was that kind of what you were doing back at that time?
Yeah. So let me set the scene for you. But
Sure.
Late 90s, early 2000s, New York City, there was a pretty vibrant cabaret slam scene with puppetry going on. The folks I mentioned before, the Elementals, which was James Godwin and John Pavlik. Tim Lagasse was a part of that group as well, would often perform with them. And then there were a lot of spaces. There was PS 122 had Surf Reality had a space. Even the downstairs, the basement gallery at CBGB's had puppet performances. Then there was the Here Theater. And then Jane Henson was also, at that time, giving use of her space at the Carriage House. She would let us rehearse there and things. So I would say there was a pretty active scene. Also, Johnny Clockworks had his space in the Village too. He had a storefront puppet theater that he was running. So I think I moved to New York and people were doing shows, and I would maybe help somebody out with one. So, but then it was just right, I'm going to start to make some shows as well. I had just come from Skidmore, where they were encouraging of, creating your own work, not just staging plays. So it felt natural, and maybe it was also right back to that, it's just like setting up the Barbies when I was 8 or something like that, where, I'm going to start to make things. And then I was pursuing trying to work professionally in puppetry at the time too. I mean, I had sewing skills. I had started to learn how to use tools and machines at UConn. So having a bit of a base that way, and then some of the folks that I had met at the O'Neill who were puppet builders at the Henson shop at the time on 68th Street, 67th Street, were like, oh, would call me if they had some weird job and they needed a little extra help or things like that. So I was sort of slowly making my way. And then those were the folks that were making slam shows as well. Eric Engelhart, Ron Binion, Matt Brooks, Robin Walsh, my friend Paul McGinnis. We were all kind of there, and then we would sort of be in each other's shows, makeup shows, and then also even curating evenings. So it was just kind of constant. And I guess maybe, right, the thing about slam pieces or shorter pieces for a cabaret night is you have the time. It's resources, but not so much time and resources, and that you can put it up. You can keep it in a bag or a few bags and bring it on the subway around New York to where you're going for the next performance. And then it's also too like, oh, you can try that out. This time, do you want to push on it more, or is it maybe that one can go to bed and it's time to work on something new again? So I think it was just the right level of stakes to get experience and work, and also like not asking your friends for too much rehearsal time.
Yeah, because if it's only a 5-minute piece, there's not days of rehearsal.
Yeah.
Well, recently, along with Tim Lagasse, who you mentioned, you've taught some how to create a slam piece classes for the Los Angeles Guild of Puppetry. What do you enjoy about helping puppeteers who are new to puppet slams create pieces?
I think that Tim and I, both having been in New York for a lot of years and participated in a lot of puppet slams, felt like we had a lot of knowledge and experience to share. Like, why not give people the benefit of all the suffering that we went through in order to figure out and find out like what some of the rules are that help make a good puppet piece, or even just like skip these steps in order to get here and start thinking about it that way. So Tim and I just felt like the cabaret scene, the puppet slam that the Guild puts on is so popular. Why not try to be in support of that and help people develop work, or if they want to think about developing something different or where to go about it. Tim and I are also big fans of multiple styles of puppetry too. So even wanting to offer that as an option and be a resource that way. So I think that it was just like, what kind of theater would we hope we could start to see around here? What kind of puppet pieces that people could think about, and just like, let's put our stupid mouths where our hands are, or something like that. Like, let's show up and not just say, well, gee, it would be nice if.
Is there a common mistake that people make when they first try to create for slams that you're like, you could use your advice to be like, no, don't do that, do this?
Well, I think my favorite, the base is like, don't show and tell the same thing, if you know it. And then always people maybe want to lip sync a song and be like, okay, well, what's the idea behind the story that you're showing? Okay, that's great. Do you need the song? Can it work in contrast to it? I think it's just, how can you surprise an audience? It doesn't have to be funny per se, but like, what can you do that might be not expected, right? We want to kind of sit forward in our seats. We want to be able to see something we haven't seen before. Puppetry can be so, well, I mean, I guess the word is experimental, but it's a departure from reality, and yet it's tangible objects. So like, how do we use that in a way that's exciting? Let's take advantage of the obvious of what puppets are and what they do well.
When you're developing a piece, and maybe you've done the piece at a couple different events, how much does the audience reaction sort of shape the slam piece or the short form piece that you're working on?
I think performing live is an opportunity to make a discovery in the moment if you're present enough with what's happening with your puppet show, like whether you hold longer or there's a different look or a take, or sometimes there's a mistake which ends up being funnier than what you intended. I think it's just being able to be comfortable enough, hopefully rehearsed enough with your piece that you can be in the moment to hear what the audience is responding to. Sometimes the idea of what you're showing has to be strong enough that it's yours, and then they can take away their own feeling or what it's supposed to mean, but hopefully there's somewhere in the middle meeting where it's important to both sides.
Let's talk a little bit about tabletop puppetry, because you've done a lot of tabletop puppetry. What is it about that art form that speaks to you?
What do I like about tabletop puppetry? I mean, again, I think we're right back to Barbies. It's like my mom would be like, it's head to toe, it's the whole thing. But I mean, right, there's some things in life that artists say like I just kind of get it. You connect to it, whether if it's painting, if it's hand and rod Muppet style puppetry, if it's playing a guitar. I put a tabletop puppet in my hands that's well built or well enough built, and it makes me want to play with it, right? See what it can do. It's great if there's another person working in collaboration without having, maybe you've worked together or not, like without too much discussion, but like making discoveries that way as well. I think a lot of art is about connection. So tabletop puppetry is yet another layer of connection because you're performing with somebody else. So all of a sudden the performance is bigger than just you, and yet you're getting to contribute as well.
Well, and you took sort of tabletop puppetry to television because you worked on the Book of Pooh, which was sort of big tabletop puppets. Was working on that, did that opportunity come about just from the networking in New York that you were doing?
Yeah. So I had not been in New York for all that long when auditions for that show came up. I think it was like early 2000, and I had moved there in late 99, fall of 99. And I had already been in the slam scene, when I moved to New York, it was like, just starting performing in theater right away, and tabletop puppetry was something that a lot of our friends were doing. Again, Eric Engelhart, Ron Binion, Matt Brooks, Tim Lagasse, the Elementals. So they were aware that I was already doing that, and those guys were actually working in the shop that was building those puppets. So that was me just knowing that there was an opportunity to audition, and that they knew me enough that they had said to like Mitchell and his production, like, oh yeah, let her in to audition, like put her on the list to audition. And they were looking for an ensemble. So I had no professional TV puppetry credits, but I had enough experience doing tabletop puppetry and seeing that I could collaborate at this audition, that it was like, okay, yeah, we're going to hire you, and you have to join the union here, join AFTRA. And I was like, oh, okay. Like it was, but it was so much based on the theater experience that I had, and knowing, and they knew that I was very interested in tabletop puppetry, that it was a passion. Yeah, that was huge. That was like, can you imagine being 23 and like, you get to basically go to like puppet school all day long, every day, collaborate, and then working also with these TV puppeteers. So the people performing the lip sync and stuff, it was Noel McNeil, it was Peter Linz, it was Eric Jacobson, Tyler Bunch, Vicky Eibner. So getting to see what they were doing, and then getting to, again, work with Robin and Matt and Ron and Eric, who were excellent physical performers. I think Ron was actually doing one of the leads as well. Ron was doing Eeyore. And then they paid me as well. So it was just, and they gave us lunch every day. So it was so fun. It was hard. It was definitely a lot to learn. And when you get put on feet, you're shoved under that table, and we all had green screen retroreflectives on, and it was sweaty, but it was awesome. That was, and we did 2 seasons of that show practically back to back. And then actually in between seasons doing refurb, I begged if I could just work in the shop there. I was like, just let me work for free. I just want to like learn from you guys. And Mary Bramer, who was running the shop at that time, she was like, no, we will pay you. I think they paid me like, the equivalent of minimum wage. But I was like, what? I get to get paid again and work for all of you guys, and I'll do whatever you want. I just want to learn how to build puppets. And again, I mean, I think that's really the magic too of when you're in your early 20s, and the New York at that time when you could actually afford to live in it. But like, I didn't have any other responsibilities. Like I was passionate about that, and I was, so happy to be in the room and learn from whomever. I'm sure I had an attitude about whatever from time to time, but like overall, that was an amazing opportunity. And then not long after that, they did the 4th season of Bear, and they brought me in as an additional puppeteer from time to time. I think that was probably more challenging because I didn't have as much actual like under the puppet experience, but that was amazing too, getting to work with Jim Krupa and Vicky and Peter and the group scenes and stuff like that was really nice of them to want to keep me in the loop, in the fold.
Yeah, you worked Bear in the Big Blue House as an additional puppeteer, and also Between the Lions as an additional puppeteer as well. What sort of, you talked about it was an intensive Book of Pooh, and then these two for sure. What sort of things did you learn working with those amazing puppeteers on all those shows that you kind of still use today?
Okay, for me personally, with my personality, it is watch and listen. And when I'm assistant puppeteering, I have, it's like learn when to ask the questions, or like just how to add without being a distraction, things like that. It's funny. I try to think about like, what can I remember about working on Between the Lions? Because that was 24 years ago. I was like, I remember being there. I was like, did I have a monkey on? I don't know. Somebody in the background. Did I assist somebody? I had been working with Jen Barnhart, who played Cleo, one of the main characters on Between the Lions, but I had worked with her in the Book of Pooh, and Peter too. So I think them also knowing me at that point in time and being like, oh yeah, like she can do a wing or whatever. Yeah, that was a pretty amazing couple of years there, because also Sesame Street was filming then too. So having an opportunity to kind of get a day or two here and there on all these shows, I feel like that was a pretty unique time. It didn't maybe last after mid-2000s, something like that in New York.
Well, you went abroad again in 2004 to Iceland to work on cult favorite LazyTown. How did that opportunity come? Was that something more networking in New York, or how did that happen?
That was auditioning. They were having auditions for LazyTown in New York at the Nickelodeon offices, and they were looking to cast native English speakers because it had been sold to Nickelodeon. So I believe they had auditions. I don't know did they have them out in LA or not. I'm not sure, but also certainly in London. So yeah, getting cast from that, and at that time, I think there was 4 of us that went from New York: David Feldman, Ron Binion, Heather Ash, and myself, and then Jodie Eichelberger, as well, and then 2 puppeteers from the UK, Sarah Burgess and Julie Westwood. So that was, and I was brought on as an assist, and then ended up taking over Trixie for that first season, and that was amazing. I was so I think I was like, I just wanted to go because I'm like, Bjork is from there. That is where I would like to go. Can I go there? And a chance to travel. And it was definitely that first season. There were a lot of learning curves, how those puppets worked. They were very big, how they wanted to shoot. I think it was really the first big episodic show like that the creator and showrunner had ever done. So obviously, it endured. They shot several seasons, and then there was a gap, and then the young woman who had played the human on it, she was too old. She had gone to college, so they, recast another girl. So it was 5 seasons. I think that's a really wonderful legacy and such a unique look. Iceland is kind of this amazing, isolated island, and it kind of takes what it wants from America, from Europe, from Scandinavia, and kind of makes it into this amalgam of what their culture is and what kind of stories they like to tell. So, and then it's got such a crazy look. So I think I'm very pro LazyTown.
Well, you mentioned that you stepped into the character of Trixie. What's that like, stepping into a character that has already been, on screen, performed by somebody else?
I think that it was still the early days, and it was not a matter of the character wasn't working out. I think it was actually just like logistics of Iceland and and health things and stuff that way. So it was kind of like, oh, she's already pretty defined, and then also this concept of the show had existed in play form and books in Iceland for a long time. So the creator knew what Trixie was. So now it was like, just do that. So in some ways it was like easiest thing I've ever done, except for the puppets were heavy. So I think maybe that might be an exception where the only thing maybe now, if they ever were to bring it back, is that she's an Asian character, and there are, we have at least a handful of really wonderful Asian puppeteers that we know that would be able to do a great job with that character. Same thing with some of the other diverse characters in the show. There's a black character, Pixel, and I think that at the time in 2003/4, there were not as many puppeteers of color at the time. So yeah, interesting to see what would happen with it now.
Yeah. Well, in 2007, you worked with Kathy Mullen on her No Strings films, and we had Kathy on the show, and she sort of talked about it. You were a character puppeteer and a wrangler. It's amazing getting to work with Kathy, but those are sort of these productions with a message and with a purpose. So what's it like going from working on, not that Bear in the Big Blue House didn't have a message or LazyTown had a message, but this is, to go from those sort of projects to No Strings.
Working on No Strings in several different sets of films for different parts of the world was quite an honor, because not only are we doing high quality productions that have humor, and the puppets were amazing, really built by just such incredible artists, to then have it know that it's going to go to certain places and it's going to be delightful for children or families that have gone through a lot. It was quite special. And then in addition to that, I had the opportunity to travel with the films and go to Indonesia and help teach some workshops there to folks that were going to be bringing these films to communities, and to give them rudimentary puppetry lessons so that they could have the puppets to interact with the kids once they show these films. So I'm so grateful for that time, and I cannot believe the wonderful films that they've done over the years for so many different countries, starting from the first one about Afghanistan, which I think they actually did at the O'Neill. That was the first film, and up to, I think, maybe one of the last ones that I did was for families in Syria that was then going to go to the refugee camps in Turkey and in Lebanon. And that might have been in like 2017 or something like that. But yeah, it was kind of an amazing coming together of these, different NGOs, Johnny from Ireland, kind of connecting up with them, and then having the talent and the skills that Kathy Mullen and Michael Frith would put into it. And then, of course, their teams that they brought together that would build the puppets. Heather Ash was one of the builders, and of course, Jim Krupa again. I'm so thankful for that time. And I love letting people know about those films. I mean, they did films for Haiti. They did stuff about, gender roles in Africa. Maybe it's time for us. We need some here, really, really wonderful group of people to work with.
Well, from television and sort of films, you then in 2008 started working with giant puppets with Walking with Dinosaurs. How did you get hooked up with Walking with Dinosaurs?
Man, that was great. So that was an audition. That was, again, they were touring in the United States. And I will say that was a connection that Raymond Carr actually had made for me. Raymond and I met working on LazyTown. He had been an intern, a puppeteer intern then, and we had kept in touch. And he had hooked up with this show, Walking with Dinosaurs. I don't remember exactly why. But they were going to start another tour. They were going to start a tour in Europe, and they wanted to keep touring the U.S., so they were looking for Americans to replace the crew of puppeteers that they already had, because this show had come from Australia. So Raymond gave them my name, and the show was playing in the New York area, and I got invited to audition. And I wasn't sure if I'd heard of the show. I looked it up online, and I looked at some clips, and I was like, I don't understand what I am seeing. Therefore I want to audition in order to at least be satisfied to understand how these things work. And it was great. I guess they were looking for a combination, right, of, I think they felt that people with TV monitor skills would be helpful, had some theatrical experience, and then maybe also like you just gave them the right vibe, like that you could handle tour life sort of thing. So yeah, I was offered a job based on that audition. But I was even just having a chance to see the puppets, I was like, I'm happy. You don't have to offer me a job, but you did. That's nice too. And they were great. They actually trained all the replacements, but they weren't sure when that was going to happen. So they were like, we're going to give you this training period. We're going to bring you on the road with us for 4 weeks or 6 weeks, and we'll train you you'll learn the show. Because they had a very regimented week in terms of performances, loading in, loading out, and how much time these puppets could actually be used before the batteries were, wear and tear stuff. So there was I always like to describe when I was learning my part, which at the time was an auxiliary role. So that meant making the sounds of the creature, 3 different dinosaurs, and then controlling like mouth and eyes and things that way. And it was kind of like the Karate Kid. It was like the wax on and wax off, because I'd have a video of the show, and I'd have like a keyboard. So we used a keyboard to make the noises, and it was like a Logitech joystick. So I'd have a paper cutout of the keyboard and a banana to stand in for the joystick, and be following along, because we also had a recorded track of like any cues that the stage manager would be giving, and then it was also visual and audio cues from what the music was doing, what the dinosaurs were doing, and then what the actor on stage was doing. So I practiced that a lot, because they basically would we want you to come into these rehearsals. You get half an hour rehearsal, maybe 3 times a week, and we want you to have these memorized by the time that you're doing that stuff. So you can't learn it on the job. You have to know that, and then learn how these things actually feel, so that you're knowing the restraints that you can do, the wear and tear, and then also just the limited time before, and then everybody has to go do their shows. So then we were watching the show as well, and maybe surreptitiously sitting in the back, looking at the keyboard printouts and what they were doing. And that was great too. That was so much fun. Another version of like a puppet boot camp before I was then brought on to do the show.
The sort of role there is voodoo puppeteer, and I think you explained a little bit of this, but what does that mean, voodoo puppeteer? Because it's not something we've heard on this show very much.
I believe that Creature Technology coined the term with the idea of if you have a voodoo doll and you're holding it and you're poking it here in your hand, it's affecting something somewhere else. So these wireless remote puppeteering systems that we're holding up, that we're operating up in the crow's nest, maybe where close to where stage management sees the show from, and it controls the dinosaurs from afar.
Well, you would later go on, I'm sure, as a sort of offshoot of that, to do How to Train Your Dragon as well, that tour. When you're puppeteering a giant dinosaur or a dragon, what makes it feel alive instead of just, it's a robot that's walking, like animatronic? What do you have to be thinking as you're puppeteering it?
Well, I mean, I think it's just a giant shout out to the people that developed these control systems and the puppets themselves. Creature Technology Company, a combination of the controls and the animatronics that they have, but also the other systems of building inside there that buffer and control. So we're using these control systems, and they're instantaneous. There's no lag. You're turning the head is turning. So that is just, you might as well have your hands on the creature in some respect. So I think it's very lifelike that way. And then it is about always what the character, whether it is a giant dragon or dinosaur, or if it's a small little, egg with legs, how is it interacting with its environment, whether it's another character on the stage, or it's looking at something, or whether it's traveling around, at what speed, why, what is it doing, is it going to eat something, is it fighting something, is it just... So I think that there's that overall unique relationship always is just what is the puppet doing? It doesn't matter what size it is. So as a puppeteer, you have that responsibility to create, the idea that the puppet is interacting with its world.
Do you, as someone who has done tabletop puppetry and then big giant dinosaurs, do you have a preference of what size puppet you like performing?
No, I love the variety. It's so great, because the thing is, I like tabletop puppetry, and that scale, it's something that I can build. I cannot build a giant dinosaur, but getting to do a giant dinosaur, and then it walks out on stage and you hear 7,000 people go, oh, come on. I mean, who's not going to have that fun experience and enjoy that reaction that happens? So yeah, I'm grateful for all of it. I kind of love all of it. I wouldn't say that I get bored, but I am really grateful for the variety of puppetry that I've had the opportunity to do.
Well, and the voodoo puppetry also led you to the Olympics. Did you ever think that your puppetry career would lead you to the Olympics, because you performed at the Sochi Winter Olympics?
Yes. So the same company, Creature Technology, built those characters. No, I did not have Sochi, Russia on my bingo card of where I would get to go. Yeah, also pretty amazing. Crazy to think about, yes.
You've done a lot of traveling around the world with your puppetry.
Getting connected with Walking with Dinosaurs was an unbelievable opportunity for travel. Yeah, I mean, I never thought that would happen. And then, right, even since, you interviewed me 10 years ago, like we did one more world tour of Walking with Dinosaurs in 2018 and 19. And that was amazing as well. So, right, so the span of that job, obviously many years not doing it, but 11 years of touring with that company and having that relationship. And what was great is I actually went to Australia just in December as a vacation, accompanying somebody else, and got to go to stop in at Creature Technology Company and see Sonny Childers and like a lot of the folks that that was the start of this big career that I had in 2008. And they had pulled out some of the dinosaurs because that show has been retired. Like it has been. And like actual dinosaurs too, like these dinosaurs were extinct. Like they, foam and spandex and latex, only has a certain life. I remember one of the skins women many years ago when I was asking like, oh, what's it like to, be doing the repairs? They travel with the show. And she was like, imagine if you wore your favorite bathing suit every day for 4 years. Imagine, and then try to sew it up, So it was like, oh, right, very worn. But yeah, there were some of those dinosaur interiors that they had pulled out of the containers, the storage containers, but a lot of the animatronics and stuff actually still work. So they decided, you know what, let's keep a couple of these as our like showroom examples, and so we'll restore them. And so I think they're in the process of bringing a couple of those back to life that they have there as examples in Melbourne.
Yeah, when we went for Puppet Up, we got to tour that, and they let us even try the T-Rex. It's amazing. It's really cool.
It's so cool. And right, do you remember like how responsive the system was?
Yeah.
Like there's no time between what you're doing and what the dinosaur is doing. And then that's the also thing too. I mean, when you're learning to use those controls, they're also teaching you cannot whip these things around. Like you really have to be very. You can do things that are fast, but you have to know what the limits are with those creatures.
Around 2008, while all this is going on, you started as a puppet builder and puppet wrangler for the Jim Henson Company. How did that opportunity come about?
I came off of tour. I was still in New York because I was going to go back and work on another show for Mitchell Kriegman called It's a Big, Big World. They were starting season 2. So I decided to go and do that. And there were some wrinkles, and that didn't quite work out. And so then actually at that moment in time, the Henson shop there in New York was looking to have somebody build something for a commercial that they were going to do. I should mention, right, so before 2008, I had also worked at Puppet Heap for a number of years at that point and done a lot of projects for them. I was working there when they started the Muppets contract and had done some building for them. And then also worked at Den Design Studio with Bob Flanagan. Bob used to do all the SNL crazy stuff. He did like Toonces the Cat. And my favorite credit that it would be like 2 Truths and a Lie is that I actually wrapped the boxes for the Justin Timberlake, Andy Samberg beep in a box. So I had worked at some of those studios. So had worked around a few different places in New York, and then started working at Henson on this commercial. It was called The Bundle. He's super cute. He's like a combination of like a mogwai and a gopher or something like that. So I got to build that. Jim Krupa, I think, built the iMech for it, and I wrangled that as well. And I think Henson was just like, oh, okay, great. Like, now we know you. So, started doing some stuff with them. And then not long after that, I had left the U.S. tour of the dinosaur show, but then I got a phone call to actually join the European tour of Walking with Dinosaurs. So then I was like, oh, well, I'm going to go tour Europe because who doesn't want to do that? So then I was gone for a while. But then, started to have a bit more of a working relationship with the Henson shop in New York.
You've been building for a long time before this point, but do you enjoy building?
Yes. It's definitely, building puppets is certainly back to that. It kind of reminds me in some ways of like childhood flow state of art and making things. I really do enjoy working with my hands, and it can be tiring. It's nice to have a break. I love that I get to bounce back and forth between building and performing, but it's like a deeply building puppets, building anything is a deeply satisfying experience for me.
Do you think it's good for puppeteers to learn just a little bit of building?
I think it's always important to have respect for the other aspects in your career, as a wrangler or what a builder is doing. Personally, I like doing both because I think they inform each other, because I do both of those and then wrangle as well. So I think that I have gotten better in every direction because I do all three. But I think, yeah, when you start to realize just how much time it takes to build a puppet, between to the mock up to the finish, even the people that are the really fast builders, it still is time consuming, and when you get a good one, right, you got to have respect for what's gone into it.
Well, there's one project I definitely want to make sure that I ask you about, and it's something you had worked on for a while, but in 2013 it was on TV, and that is Jane Henson's Nativity puppet show. So can you talk about getting connected? I mean, you mentioned Jane opening the carriage house and stuff, but how did you get connected with this show, the Nativity show?
Working on that was first being one of the builders at the shop in New York when Jane decided to develop it. I think she had done a little bit of development at the O'Neill, and I was not involved then. And then they decided to do some in Florida, and they hired the shop in New York to build those puppets. So I, along with, it was like Annie Fresh, Tim Lagasse, myself, Connie Peterson, probably some other folks that maybe are not coming to mind right now. We were building sort of some rod puppets, some tabletop puppets. And then they got Jane to just come in and like actually sculpt the faces as well. She was like, "No, I can't do that." And they were like, "What? Yeah, you should." And she was like, "Oh, okay." So that was really fun too, to just be around her, kind of getting back into some of her art. So I think doing that, building those, and then between then and in 2013, Jane had passed away maybe in 2010, I think, something like that, or maybe a little bit later. But they wanted to stage the Nativity in New York as part of a holiday special, but also a tribute to her. So I think we built some more. Maybe we rebuilt the puppets then at that point too, and we're just putting the cast together. And I think because of my work that I had been doing on my own, still the tabletop work, and I was known to the Henson Foundation in New York because I had received grant money over the years on different shows and development. So I think I was just on their radar as somebody that was creating shows and directing shows. So asked to transition into that to help for that specific part of the special.
That is just a cool project to get to work on, with Jane's, because, we all know about Jane Henson, but sometimes very much overshadowed by Jim, and just how much into puppetry she was.
She was so into puppetry, and she was just, I really do want to specifically say she was so supportive of a pretty reasonable sized group of artists in New York in terms of how generous she was with the carriage house space to rehearse in. Rehearsal space in New York is not readily available to those of us on limited budgets. And so to be able to just ask and say, "Hey, could I?" They had a little series called Puppetry at the Carriage House with Patch that kind of over a number of years. And then, that not only would it be some rehearsal space, but then it would be a, somewhat informal showing, but 50 seats. They'd usually cater it. They'd get us some food, and it was a special spot to be. And Jane, I remember one of the last times I did one of my shows there, I think in 2011, Jane would just come for our rehearsals, and she would show up for a little while, and then somebody else that ran the space for a long time, photographer John Barrett, he would be there too, and they would chit chat, and they'd talk about the old times, and as we were rehearsing and setting up stuff, and I was like, yeah, this is nice. They just want to be here, and it was really quite a gift. to have that for so many years. And it's wonderful now too to see that the carriage house is, has a different life. It's transitioned sort of in Heather's hands, but that it's still trying to be operated in that way as a service to puppeteers and people in the community there.
In 2015, you moved to Los Angeles. What was the motivation to do that?
In 2015, I moved to New York. I had stopped touring. Touring had taken a fairly big break. And, I should say by that point, I had actually moved out of my apartment in New York, I think in like 2011, because I was just starting to tour with How to Train Your Dragon. And they were like, oh, this is going to go on for years. You're going to be touring. Well, that's not what happened. The show didn't quite work out how they planned. It wasn't quite the same success versus financial costs as Walking with Dinosaurs, so it goes. But I had moved out of my apartment to save money. And I was also I was in a relationship with somebody internationally at the time. So I was like, oh, well, we'll figure out our lives and figure it, you don't have to slot into my New York life. We'll make it work. So, best laid plans. None of the tour and the relationship didn't work out. And I had moved my stuff to Vermont. I was living with a very dear friend up there who I had met at Sandglass Institute. And that was a great place to be. I had actually staged one of my last shows at Sandglass. They had a winter series, and I had done a production of my show called Do Elephants Dream of Eclectic Sheep, and I had a great time there, and I was really proud of the work I had done there. But it was like, okay, I don't feel that living in Vermont is the solution for how I want my career in puppetry to keep going. But I was so thankful for the time there and the relationships with people I have there and still have. So I looked briefly at moving back to New York, and I was like, no, too expensive. What am I going to do? There wasn't a ton going on. And a handful of friends had relocated out to LA, and the Muppets ABC had just started shooting, and there were other things going on. And the New York shop was like, oh, do you want us to make a connect? Do you want us to call so-and-so at the shop, the creature shop in LA, and you can come by and meet them? And I was like, yeah. So I decided, right, I'll come out, take a bunch of readings, see what it's like. And I did. And I was like, well, why not? I just need a little reboot. If it doesn't work out, you can leave. So that was, 10 years, no looking back. It's been great.
You're still here.
Yeah.
And you got to work on the Muppets ABC show when you shortly after moving out, yeah?
Yeah, I was brought on as an extra, both in the workshop and as an additional performer. So that was wonderful. That was super fun. And then also at that time, Henson was filming No You Shut Up, the last season of No You Shut Up. So they brought me on as a wrangler for that. And that was an interesting show because it was once a week or once every other week, something like that. So, and they were like, oh, we can find some stuff for you in the shop in the meantime. But there were lots of little bits and pieces of other puppet stuff going on while Muppets ABC was filming. And everybody was so busy with that. So every little puppet job that sort of came up during that time, I felt like I had an opportunity to work on. So that was great. I was very busy the first sort of 6 months of being here, which was exactly what I needed.
Yeah, it's good to not show up and then have no work. And
Yeah,
then you're
exactly.
like, how am I going to make this work?
Yeah, and then I think I think Puppet Up had a run maybe at the Kirk Douglas at that time, that one. So yeah, it was just, and sort of also getting to meet everybody. I had known some of you guys from Puppet Up already because of that Toronto run we had done. But yeah, just getting to meet more puppeteers that were LA based that I hadn't really worked with before too much.
This is not a question I actually had on here, but since you brought up Puppet Up, I'll ask you. You've wrangled a lot for Puppet Up. That's where I first met you, was Toronto. How is wrangling for Puppet Up different from wrangling for a TV show or a film? Or is it different?
Wrangling on Puppet Up is very different, I would say, from a TV show because it's kind of more like maintenance in between, unless there is a god awful emergency that happens on stage during, and I can't even think about what it would be. You are just sort of standing by, getting stuff preset and doing resets and making sure all the puppets are doing okay in between shows. Whereas when you're wrangling on a TV show, I was like, oh my God, there's a hair in their eye. Hold on, let me adjust that, or I have to do this next prop or getting ready for this next scene. It's always what else. Whereas Puppet Up is the same set of puppets and the same sort of general setup for the puppets, The one thing I will say that I adore about wrangling Puppet Up is I am backstage laughing all the time. I love like knowing that show so well and knowing so many of you guys so well, and yet I still like sit back there with my arms crossed. And there's a monitor backstage, and I'm always it's like a stupid smile on my face. I mean, all right, I guess I just feel like a member of the team. Like I love getting to see my coworker friends like succeed, and then also too I love Puppet Up so much because I don't want to do it at all. I'm like, I am not an improv person, and I think it's so scary. I'm like, oh, I'd love to do some of the historical recreation sometimes, but the whole time I just feel like a fan because I'm like, I don't want to do that.
Yeah, and I know that in Puppet Up, there's really no, like, if a rod falls off a puppet, then that puppet is just out for that show. It's no big deal because there's a million other puppets. And also, if an eye falls off or if
Right, that's your job.
a wig falls off during the show, then we have to use it.
Yeah, totally.
There's no stopping it come out.
Right,
So,
yeah.
I can see where it's a little bit lower pressure than television. But we're always very appreciative having you there and making all the puppets look good. Because you also I noticed this, even just on the racks, they have to look nice. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And it's not just, after we're done with the show, there's puppets laying everywhere, especially after the finale. And, you and Catherine Malloy and Rachel Burson, who have helped out with wrangling too, you always really take care of it and make sure that that's a priority, is that when the puppets are on the racks, they look nice. So it's appreciated.
Yeah, you're welcome.
You also worked on Crank Yankers. And Crank Yankers is an interesting show because it's lip synced to tracks. And so did you do some of that where you had to lip sync to performances, or were you more the assisting, or what was your role on Crank Yankers?
Oh no, I had they have on Crank Yankers, they have the phone call maker, which is usually the voice talent, and then what they call the mark. So I certainly did my fair share of marks on that. And yeah, you get assigned your calls maybe Friday before the work week starts, and you are spending time on those calls. You're learning every break, every stutter, every that way. By the last couple of seasons, they did actually put some more tech in there that you could have some beeps and stuff so you knew when it was coming, which I don't think they had the first few seasons. But it is a lot of time, usually 3 to 5 minutes or something like that of memorizing that, because you want to know that stuff so cold that whatever the ridiculous blocking that the show director was asking you to do, you could focus on that while also nailing your lip sync, and then, and whatever else had to happen. Because that show, I think the magic of it is sure, the phone call is funny, but whatever the ridiculous premise they have going on, staging in the background and stuff is really like where the magic of that puppetry is. So yeah, that was a lot of work. But it's great. It's a great training to learn, because I think it's not just a lip flap; it's the physicality of breath and kind of finding the comedy and the mundane of what those phone calls were.
Do they give you a script, or is it just the audio?
I think you were sent a script. Also, it's so funny. I'm like, it wasn't that long ago. What happened? Yeah, I think it was a script and a track, because I think maybe I would sometimes like to look at it in order to have an understanding of what I was hearing in case I needed to make a note. And I think people have different ways of learning too, that sometimes visually looking at the words while you're also hearing them helps.
Well, another lip sync show that you worked on is Slumberkins, the Jim Henson Company Slumberkins, where you played Sloth. Can you talk about working on that show and sort of how that was the same or different from Crank Yankers?
Well, Slumberkins was scripted, right? So that, I think, maybe was the difference right there, and getting voice talent. But they had kids voicing the animal kid characters, which was a real treat as well. They got really wonderful talent to do that. And then there were parents of these animals as well. And this show was developed from a property that already existed. The Slumberkins were these emotional stuffed animals developed by these two women. And so I love the concept of getting to work on a show that was kind of, I think, teaching emotional intelligence to children, like having to work out what the conflict was. And I think the point of every episode was not that the conflict was resolved. It was almost more like the awareness. They gained awareness of what was upsetting them or what was troubling them. Slumberkins also, it was kind of almost like three different shows that I had worked on coming together. So we had digital backgrounds. So suddenly we have, much like the Book of Pooh, interacting with environments that maybe were not there. We're doing lip sync with these characters, playing Sloth, and then we also shared, various other background characters of, I think I also played like Yak Mom and Bigfoot Dad. But then also we had full body puppetry days as well. So there were half body versions of these characters and full body characters. And those of us that were in the cast, some liked tabletop puppetry more than others. And, because I had experience doing it and I liked it, Russ was like, great. And Russ Welko would be like, you were in charge of figuring this part out. And, and it was great to have a little time and for a different team of people. I mean, working with Donna Kimball and Victor Yared, and Alice Deneen and Amy Garcia, and playing with these great little scenes, sometimes in a song or something. I mean, I think I tend to remember, I don't know if it was Unicorn or Fox, but like walking along a log and then jumping off that and having a chance to not only rehearse that, but also with a team of me saying like, oh, hey, so I think like the physical relationship between the person on the head and the person on the feet works really well. Of like, let's try this thing. Like you're on the head, you pull up, and can you feel me holding the foot rods? No, I'm going to pull you back down there. Okay, you feel that tension? That's great. I know it's so hard to try to keep that in mind when you're also trying to lip sync and also trying to nail the monitor, but that's what we're aiming for, and that'll sort of help us. And then like, oh, and then if we want to walk, if you pull back a little bit to the left, and if we want to go right, like that'll help us. So I think we just kind of started to develop a language, and because we were doing it over the course of a season, we'd build up on that, and that was fun to see. I think that maybe just like helping to take the edge off of those days, because it wasn't diving into the unknown every time.
And with a character with Sloth, what were you like moving slower than the other just because it is a sloth, or did he or she move at the same?
I think maybe sometimes, like, no, he didn't move that slow, but he tended to be, his character was that he was a little shy, a little insecure. There was particularly this one episode I remember where Sloth always thought he had to bring a present every time he had to go see anybody because they wouldn't like him otherwise. I'm like, oh my God, I identify with that. So it was more, certain qualities of each character. I mean, I think that like Fox had a bit of an ego / temper, and so it would get kind of upset easily. And then like Yak had younger triplet siblings, and so was being like ignored. So things that way, emotional traits that they were learning to deal with, and how to express themselves.
Well, another project that you worked on recently that is a huge project is Five Nights at Freddy's. And which character were you in control of Five Nights at Freddy's?
I have done, Five Nights at Freddy's 2, there were a lot, but I do the animatronics for Chica, in both films, yes. And then in the second one, hopefully no spoilers by this point, there's a lot of Chicas. There's like 3 Chicas in this one, and I was doing the animatronics for that.
And is that, the animatronics harken back to the voodoo puppetry for the dinosaurs, or is it different, or?
Well, controllers are a lot more like, maybe like a PlayStation controller or a Futaba. I guess maybe it's actually their model airplane controllers, but it's certainly the same idea. It's that idea of knowing what the parameters are, how much stress or strain you need to put on them. But then the nice thing about the controllers, as well as you could sort of like, oh, can I have the mouth on my right hand and the blinks and the eyes this way here? And so a little bit of specializing for your own controller. But again, it's about this puppetry putting onto this larger form, and also coordinating with the stunt performer that was inside the suit, of being like, oh, if you're going to turn your body and then I'm going to do something with the head. So kind of working it out a little bit that way, that it is a collaboration. That way. And then certainly in the second film as well, we also had some puppet characters that required 11 performers too. So talk about a version of tabletop puppetry or team puppetry of having to bring that many people together under pretty extreme circumstances, still having to wear hoods, still having to do it at monitor. It's, it's supposed to be a character on top of a car and it's attacking. So there were a lot of literal moving parts.
Were you familiar with Five Nights at Freddy's before you? did the show?
Again, I am old, so I was not. I did work in the shop on the build, so as that was coming up and they were like, oh, Five Nights at Freddy's and we're going to do the build. And I was like, I know about Five Freddy. I know about but I had no idea about the game. So I've certainly learned a lot about it, but probably nothing in comparison to the people that are the real FNAF fanatics even. But that's been so fun to be a part of and see so many people positively respond to it. And then also, too, like a shout out to the producers, the creator, the director, Emma Tammy, that they wanted it to be real, that those characters should be as though they are the animatronics from the original pizza parlor, that they had to be real. And I loved hearing that discussion on the first film where they're like, oh, and then that part was CG, right? And they were like, no, that is also real. And to know that we pulled that off. And then also, of course, the designers at Henson who made those translations into real practical costumes and stuff as well. Like, it's just, I always like, oh, that looks cool. But then I see like, you know, what the comparison is for the game. I'm like, oh, that's identical. Wow. Okay, good job.
In a horror-leaning project like Five Nights at Freddy's, what makes a puppet feel unsettling rather than just spooky? Like, oh, it's a, creature character. Like, what does your performance change at all when you're doing sort of a horror film?
I think your performance definitely changes when you're doing a horror film. I mean, some of that for Five Nights is certainly in the director and the creator's hands of what they're asking you to do or not do. I mean, I think it's always, you ask anybody who's got like a puppet phobia, if a puppet stares too long at you without blinking, you're like, ugh. So, I mean, there is a fair amount of smaller movements. I mean, I would say the key phrase probably would have been less is more for those animatronics. And then I think also just relates to the game of like, they don't move, you don't see them move that much. It's like they're here and you look away and you look back and then suddenly they're closer to you as well. So I think, those of us that like to perform and you like want to see yourself on screen or your performance on screen, learning that like, oh, my performance actually looks better the less of it that you see, not because we did a bad job, but because that makes it scarier. And that's what the intent is.
What's a skill young puppeteers often overlook that you think is essential on a professional set?
I think that it's always a good idea to see if you can learn the information that you need by listening, as opposed to like asking a lot of questions or interfering. It's sort of, there's a lot going on, but but it happens sequentially. So then the more experienced you become, you know when to ask your questions, when the right time is. And so I think that, when things are not as intense, to ask questions. I always love the adage of like, don't talk about another project when you're working on this project. Like, put your energy there. Let's focus on this, maybe at lunch or whatever, but like stay focused, stay topical. Let's put the energy into the thing that we're doing.
Is there a style of puppetry you haven't really explored yet, but you really want to try out? I mean, you've done so many different styles, but
I still have a lot to learn about marionettes, I would say. It's not necessarily a style of puppetry that I lean to, but or attracted to, but it's in the hands of people that we know that are adept at them. It's wonderful, and I really appreciate that. And I have some experience, and I have worked on some marionette projects, but it's a unique set of skills from other styles of puppetry.
And as someone who has worked on a ton of other projects, both professionally and on your own and stuff, how do you kind of protect your creative space to keep focused on the projects you want to develop? Because you're also somebody who creates a lot of pieces for yourself.
I have always kept a creative notebook and try to write down all of my ideas so that I can revisit them. I'm a big believer in the idea of momentum. The sooner you start to work on something when the moment of the idea occurred to you, I think that there's energy to be harnessed there, and the longer it sits, you can maybe never get around to it. I think I want to say in like Elizabeth Gilbert's Big Magic book or something like that. It's not the first time, but I remember in her book specifically talking about the idea that ideas exist maybe outside of you. So if an idea comes to you, but you're like, oh yeah, I'll get to it, but you don't, it might be like, I'm gonna move on, and somebody else is gonna have that idea. So you might lose it, and maybe that's what was meant to be. But yeah, certainly that idea of sticking with it sooner than later. I will say there is an element of protectiveness about an idea when I'm developing something or when I first think about something. And maybe it's, again, that idea, that concept, if you talk about it too much, maybe you've talked it out and you won't actually do it, or somebody will be like, oh, that sounds dumb, or even not anything that direct, but just say something to kind of make you not. So I think that sometimes not to try to be secretive, but just what I've learned about how to make something happen is to not talk about it too much. Just try to do it, spend some time with it. The other artist that I really admired, the late, great David Lynch, always talked about when he went into his art studio, he needed to be in there for a minimum of 4 hours in order to get 20 minutes of good painting. He's like, you can't be in your studio and when you think you're going to like have to go out in 20 minutes, like you have to be there and just be in it. That was my impression. But I like that. And he called it like catching the big fish as well, of like sitting and waiting and then waiting a little bit longer for an idea to arrive. I think that you need space, you need a void for creativity to actually drop in. Anybody who's like, you go on a walk and you're not thinking about your thing and then suddenly it kind of comes to you. Like, I do think that there's that process that's required as well.
I love it. Well, the question I like to ask at the end of every interview is, what's been the highlight of your puppetry career so far?
I will be sort of generic, but I'm really thankful for is like longevity at this point. 25, 26 years of getting to do this, have different opportunities, work with different people. Certainly working on a big film the last couple of years was amazing, getting to be in New Orleans. I mean, I think it's the travel that goes along with it, the relationships and collaboration. Yeah, I mean, I think it's just the highlight of it sounds so sappy, but that I still really love it, and I still... Even just recently, like I worked on this build and we had to do a little demo of these puppets for who they were being built for. And they were like, oh, can we just put on a song for you to lip sync to? And this was like a tabletop puppet that had a mouth. And they were like, do you know the song Pour Some Sugar on Me? And I was like, oh, I sure do. Like, put it on, and just getting to like surprise them. And like, there was no pressure. I was not auditioning for this part. I was just showing the thing that we made. And we just had so much fun. I had fun. So yeah, I'm really thankful that I still really enjoy it. I'm not too bitter yet. We'll see what happens next.
Amanda, thank you so much for being on Under the Puppet today. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. Full circle, I feel like you reminded me about stuff that I've done, or that it's 10 years since we officially talked on the air, on the record.
On the record, yeah. Many thanks to Amanda Maddock for being on the show. For links to some of the things we discussed, check out the show notes for this episode number 117, over at underthepuppet.com. And if you'd like to hear even more of my conversation with Amanda, it's available to the bonus content patrons over at patreon.com/Saturday Morning Media. Also, if you'd like to study with Amanda, she's teaching a summer puppetry intensive through Sandglass Theater in July and August. Applications are open now, and I'll have a link for more info in the show notes for this episode. I would like to send a special thank you out to all the Saturday Morning Media Patreon patrons who help make this show possible. Patreon patrons at the producer level and above who get a special shout out are Kathy Crawford, Eve Cunning, David Akers, Tony Urbano, Brandy, Scott Armstrong, Paul, Ricky Chavez, Lee Thompson, Macy Thomas, and Chris Pat Stone. To become a patron, visit patreon.com/Saturday Morning Media. And thank you for your support. Well, that's going to do it for this episode of Under the Puppet. If you have questions, suggestions, or feedback about the show, send them via email to underthepuppet@gmail.com, or you can connect with the show on Instagram or Facebook by searching for Under the Puppet. And don't forget to tell a friend about the show. This episode marks the start of the 10th season of Under the Puppet. I would like to send a special thank you out to all of you for supporting the show over the years, and I'm super excited for the guests we have coming up this season. My thanks to Dan Ring for letting us use his music, Parker Jacobs for the logo design, the amazing Patreon patrons who literally make this show possible, and finally, a big thank you to my tireless editor, Steven Staver, who is such a huge part of why this show sounds so good. Thank you to all of you, and here's to Season 10. Thank you so much for listening. Under the Puppet is copyright 2026 Saturday Morning Media, Grant Pachoco, executive producer, all rights reserved. www.saturdaymorningmedia.com.
You've been listening to Saturday Morning Media. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.